Hi, this is Anita Berry with Johnston Stewart here to share with you about the 2023 legislative session. The session officially started this Tuesday and will last for the next 60 days with a planned adjournment on May 5th. Members had up until noon on Tuesday to file any bills to be considered for this legislative session. To date, there are over 1,700 bills filed, so a lot to get done in just 60 days. In addition to that, members have submitted over $4 billion in budget requests. The only thing that the legislature is constitutionally required to do in that 60-day period is to pass a balanced budget. Hopefully those conversations will go smoothly this year and we will adjourn on time. In addition to that, we have some pretty significant policy bills that have been filed that are priorities for both the House Speaker, the Senate President, as well as the governor. Those priorities were outlined on Tuesday in sessions by both the House and the Senate, as well as during a joint session in which the legislature received the State of the State address from the governor. Many of those priority bills continued to move this week as the legislature conducted additional committee meetings. Remember, they've already been meeting in committee weeks over the last 2 months. So there has been some work already done prior to the start of session. Just to touch on a few of those priority bills that have an impact that amplifies membership. The first one is a big push by the business community, including the Florida Chamber, to make some considerable reforms to the state's tort laws. This includes changes to insurance bad faith, accuracy and damages, as well as addressing some one-way attorney fee provisions. The business community feels very strongly that making these changes will help to cut down on lawsuit costs, which in turn creates significant costs for businesses. That legislation passed out of its first committee in the Senate this week and passed its final committee in the House this week. Second, the Senate President has made it known that her largest priority really of the session is to pass some pretty substantial changes to help with the affordable housing crisis going on in the state. This bill does things like adding pretty significant recurring funding into both rental and affordable home ownership, as well as trying to ease some of the regulations to help speed up and make it easier for affordable housing to be built. That bill passed off of the Senate floor this week and passed out of its first House committee this week. We do expect that the House will continue to move that along and likely at some point take that Senate bill that's already passed the floor and pass it off of the House floor. The speaker's really one of his largest priorities this year is addressing school choice. There is a pretty considerable school choice package, which really expands the voucher system to be more universal. This bill passed its final committee in the House and its second of 3 committees in the Senate, so it is moving along very quickly as well. Public safety is another priority of the governor, the House Speaker, and the Senate President. There is a large bill that contains a provision that many are calling constitutional carry. This has to do with concealed carry. In that bill, there are also combined some school safety provisions. That bill is now ready for the floor in both chambers after this week. The Senate President has continued to push legislation to address local ordinances. This is a continuation of a conversation from last session where the legislature passed what many called a preemption to end all preemptions, really so that businesses don't have to continue to come back to the legislature when there are disputes with local governments and look to the legislature to pass preemptions of local government power. That bill last session was ultimately vetoed by the governor, and the Senate President has made it a priority to come back and try to address some changes within that legislation and hopefully make it through the governor's veto this year. This bill is slightly different than last year's. It would still require local governments to conduct what's called a business impact estimate on how those local ordinances are going to impact businesses. It also provides some additional rights to those that are challenging ordinances. This bill passed the full Senate off of the floor this week. There has been a similar bill filed in the House. It has not yet received a committee hearing, though. There are several bills this session that are addressing school board elections. Almost all of them saw some type of movement this week, if not in the House, then in the Senate, and a couple of them in both chambers. These bills really range from adding term limits for school board members, requiring school board races to be held in a partisan manner. Right now, they are nonpartisan races, as well as changing residency requirements so that school board members would be required to live in the district at the time of election and no longer at the time of qualifying. So a lot of action related to school boards. We know that this has been a hot topic really from the governor over the last year or so, and continue to see some movement on these bills very likely through the legislative session. Locally, we have some transportation issues going on at the state level. The Tampa Bay Area Regional Transit Authority has really announced its intention to go ahead and seek being dissolved by the state legislature. TBARDA has really struggled over the last several years to gain a lot of meaningful traction, especially with their funding having been vetoed by the governor over the last several years. There are bills moving in both the House and the Senate that would dissolve TBARDA. The House bill is ready for the floor, and the Senate bill has one additional committee left to go. Finally, just one little note, there is legislation again this year. We see it every single year to address local government regulation of vacation rentals. That is an issue that we track very closely for Amplify Clearwater. The City of Clearwater's ordinance is currently grandfathered at the time. That bill was supposed to be heard in its first Senate committee this week. However, it was temporarily postponed. I have seen that it's been added to an agenda for next week. So we'll be watching that very, very closely to see what happens. So a lot going on in Tallahassee. We anticipate a lot more to happen. 1 week down, we have 8 more to go, and we will be continuing to keep y'all updated on what's going on. Thank you so much.